awesome. Hey, everybody, and welcome back to Depression Vacation with your friends, Hal
and Shannon.
Yes, we're not just hosts of a podcast. We are friends to each and every one of the 22 of you who regularly tune into this podcast. And we love every single one of you. Well, I do. Shannon tolerates you.
I'm kidding. No, I do love you. I do.
Yeah.
You give me purpose.
Yeah, but it's been a week. The temperature was in the high 70s when we last did our last episode. It has since plummeted to the 20s. I found out my house does not have a ton of insulation in it this week, which is fun. All of my walls are freezing cold.
Yeah, and my job, like the building that I work in, does not have working heat, and so all of my employees are like working in their winter coats, and I feel really bad. So I made a stink about it, and now they're coming out to fix the heat. But I broke down. I bought like a little space heater, and I've just been like closing my office door and huddling next to the space heater.
Yeah, I've been debating maybe just getting a space heater for my bed, because that's kind of what I was originally going to do with my house, because my house is built for central air, but it didn't have a unit, and I was going to buy one before the summer, but it was so expensive, and I decided just to like spend most of my time in my bedroom and just get a window unit. And I'm wondering if maybe that's the best way to do it for heat too for the winter, because man, those heating prices are kind of out of control right now.
All the prices are too damn high.
I know, seriously, people, figure your shit out.
Yeah, I don't know who's in charge of that kind of thing, but get it together, goddammit.
Al needs to be able to afford his Sheets quesarito every day.
Hell yeah.
Otherwise, we're going to have a problem. But yeah, it's getting like cold outside. I feel like, and since daylight savings just happened again recently too, I don't know if I've been struggling recently, but I've just been a bit more downer in the last couple of weeks. Just, adjusting to the fact that it's going to be dark and cold for the next 4 to 5 months.
Mm-hmm. I'm not happy about it.
Me neither.
I have hard opinions about it.
Yeah. Do you want to share these opinions?
No, I don't.
I think you just did.
I did. It speaks for itself. It just pisses me off. I'm my least happy self in the wintertime. And Ryan fucking loves the winter. He will run out like a golden retriever and be like, look at me, I'm outside. And I'll be like, good for you. And I'll be standing at the door with my mittens and my scarf and just like, I'm so glad you're having fun, baby. Future husband. So
Here,
nice.
fetch.
Yeah. There's a little bit of feedback, just so you know.
Okay. Hold on.
But Hal doesn't know because guess what, guys? I'm in charge of monitoring the sound this time.
Hal does not have a pair of headphones right now. Do you still hear feedback?
A little bit, yeah.
Huh. I wonder where it's coming from. Is your phone near you?
It's always near me. I am 26 years old.
I'm 37 years old, and my phone is usually near me as well.
I put it over there.
Is it better now?
I don't know. Probably. Yeah, it is actually a little bit.
Woohoo. Okay, so we found the culprit. Just a bunch of, I guess, are you a millennial or are you like in the other generation?
Dude, I don't fucking know anymore. I was under the impression that I was on the cusp of like millennial to Gen Z. Mm-hmm. So the way I like to think about it is I'm not a Disney adult, but I also didn't eat Tide Pods.
Yeah.
So I'm somewhere in between, you know?
That's kind of where I fall generationally, too, because, like, I always thought I was, like, at the tail end of Gen X, but apparently I'm just, like, an elder millennial is the way it goes, because I think millennials start in 82 is the way they described it. So, like, yeah, none of us can put our phones away in any situation anyway. So.
Well, and it doesn't even fucking matter. My dad's 46. He can't put his fucking phone down either. Mm. So I keep saying that at my wedding we're going to lock his up in a special box, and he's not allowed to touch it till after the ceremony.
If you're listening, Brian, that's where it's going.
It is. It is.
Yeah, it must be interesting though. Like, I feel like this is a big difference between you and me because both of my parents were pretty old. When I was born, and I'm the oldest of three. Like, my dad was 40 and my mom was 38. First kids for both of them. And so, like, it was interesting, like, growing up, because almost all of the kids, like, in my classes, his parents were, like, in their early 20s or, I guess, like, early 30s at that point, too. And so it was interesting having my parents being significantly older. But your dad is, like, your age, apparently, because you said he was 19?
Yeah, so I like to play this fun game where I'm like, hey, Dad, guess what? And he goes, what? And I'm 26 and I don't have a 7-year-old. And he's like, that's not a flex, Shannon. That's most people. And I'm like, well, you're not most people now, are you? And he's like, you don't get to judge me. I brought you into this world. So,
ooh, that's a boom. Like, wow.
Like a fun little dance we do, you know, verbal banter.
That's like the limit break version of Because I Said So.
Yeah, no, and I try to make jokes about it, and then he like hits me with like, you're the greatest thing that's ever happened to me. And I'm like, how am I supposed to roast you when you're like just standing there saying nice things about me? Don't do that.
This is exactly how I function in relationships too. I just say nice things that are on my mind, and please forgive me for my other shortcomings. Here, don't you want a smile and some flowers? No, the answer is usually no, but...
Aw, that's sad, Hal.
Yeah. Anyway, I had something interesting happen to me yesterday that's tangentially related to mental health.
Tell me.
So, like right around the time, like in the height of the pandemic, when I was starting to like completely lose my focus, which then again is one of the reasons I went on medication recently, I had started shooting a series of shorts with like a lot of people that I never fucking finished, like ever. And the first 4 I shot were actually with Ashley Madavi, and we shot this series of like pretty short shorts, like the first one we did is a little under 3 minutes, and then the one we edited yesterday was a little under 2 minutes, called 80s Girl, which is just like her being the most outrageous 80s person you can, imagine, with pop culture references at the wazoo. And we shot them 2.5 years ago, and we finally just posted the first episode today. So I'm excited about that. It's just... mostly, like, I think it's really funny because Ashley, like, kills it and everything. But also, like, from my end, it's nice just to finish something that's been, like, hanging over my head for 2.5, especially something so simple as just, like, a 3-minute short.
Yeah.
That's just been, the anxiety has made me weary about for so long. Now I just have, like, 10 other shorts I shot that I need to edit, so.
Good for you, Hal. I'm happy for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Thanksgiving is coming up this week, too, so.
Yeah. Thanksgiving. We had Friendsgiving yesterday. That was pretty cool. Except nobody wanted to make a turkey. So I stopped at Giant and got like 4 rotisserie chickens. And it worked out perfectly. So
there's a bit on that Joe Pera did in one of his episodes about like, don't you find it strange that a rotisserie chicken fully cooked is $5.99, but an uncooked one is $8?
So it was a fully cooked rotisserie chicken. They were $8.99 each. Mm-hmm. I was like, what happened to $5 rotisserie chickens? I was mad.
Yeah,
I was really mad.
That's inflation, man. Like we were talking about, get your shit together,
What's
money
happening
king.
to this world?
Yeah, it's been like I mean, I'm sure like everybody basically below a certain line has been struggling a little bit financially right now. But like for me, it's kind of hit just as I already had to like cut back on spending significantly to like get my mortgage underwater. So yeah, it's been quite a year in that regard. Yeah.
Life sucks.
Yeah, life does suck sometimes. So
yeah.
But life can be cool, too.
I guess. That's what they tell me.
Man, we're really down today, aren't we?
Shit,
We're just like...
I don't know. It's fucking... What time is it? Like 8 o'clock at night?
Yeah.
We don't usually do the podcast this late.
Yeah.
I think we're just both ready for bed, and we're just like, life sucks. I want to go to sleep.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel, too. Like, It's just... so, like, this last weekend, so my girlfriend doesn't... She lives somewhat far away, and we actually went, like, just because, like, I was going on vacation a certain time and, like, her work schedule was intensified. I didn't see her, actually, for, like, almost 3.5 weeks, even though we talk every single day. And then, she caught COVID, too, was another thing. Like,
people still get COVID?
Yeah, it was
Damn.
It was a little rough for her, too. Like, not going to lie, I was, like, worried, of course, as you are when a loved one gets COVID.
I'm waiting for Rona to give me round 3. Let's go. It's like, you know what? Full marathon this shit. Like, I've beaten you twice. Let's get, just this one for all the marbles. Rocky 3 style.
Yeah, I'm pretty convinced that I had the Rona over this summer, too. And I don't know if I trust, like, the rapid tests anymore because I took so many rapid tests and they were all negative. But, like, I got super, like 2 weeks before I went on my vacation, there was somebody in our office who had tested positive. I felt fine for the most part, but then like I felt super fatigued all the time past a certain point, and I thought maybe it was allergies, but like looking back on it was probably coronavirus, honestly. That's
the thing for me when I had it. So I had it twice, and both times it was the fatigue that got me because I usually when I'm sick, it keeps me up. I can't go to sleep when I'm sick. It's the worst. But when I had corona both times, I was in bed the entire time and sleeping. And so when I got it the second time, I was like, why am I so tired? And then I looked within myself and I remembered past Shannon and I was like, God damn it. And I wasn't entirely convinced, though, because the second time is when Ryan and I went through that breakup, and I was like, do I have corona or am I just sad?
I remember this because you couldn't come to the VidJam screening because you caught corona. Or no, it was the opposite. Like, you had just finally gotten negative right when we were shooting just the insert scene. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was a good time.
Yeah. But anyway, since like this weekend, since she was around, like, and we spent the weekend together, I stayed up way too late and then woke up way too early because she brought her dog with her, and the dog gets up to go to the bathroom at 6. We stayed up until like 2 a.m. the other night too, so like it was great but it's just like my body can't run on 4 hours of sleep anymore. So.
What kind of a dog is it?
He is a Pomeranian and Poodle mix, a Poodleranian.
So cute. That is so cute.
He's pretty awesome. I love him. So. We watched all of Ted Lasso too, which
I haven't seen it.
I have been wanting to watch it forever, and it's like I won't go into like a review of the TV show here, but I'll just say that it was like one of the most wonderfully real shows I've seen. Like, I've heard it was like super positive, anti-cringe, just nice person comedy. And so I was kind of like, I like the concept of that in theory, but I'm like, oh man, is this going to be sappy? Like, am I going to blow my nose with a pancake? Is this going to be This Is Us Redux again? But it actually was very like genuine in all of its like stuff. So I thought that was very interesting. And they deal a lot with mental health issues, like more than any other TV show I've ever seen, really. And I think mostly in constructive ways too. So yeah, if you guys get a chance, I mean, it's already won like all the Emmys, so I'm doubting that I'm breaking, the news on this show to anybody.
Yeah. Well, and that just reminded me, so you were saying about like feel-good comedy and that kind of thing. So the most recent book I read, well, before the most recent one, was Salem's Lot by Stephen King. I was reading that for like the the Halloween times. And then afterwards, I was like, man, that was kind of a downer.
Yeah.
I feel like I need something that's like a little bit more uplifting. And now, Hal, I have roughly over 400 books in my house. That's not including the Kindle books that I have access to, the audiobooks I have access to. Just, I have a lot of books. And I'm looking at my bookshelf and I was like, I could really use a feel-good read. And I look at the bookshelf and I was like, oh no, there is nothing here. So my closest thing I could get to a feel-good read was Jurassic Park. And so I just knocked that out in like 4 days. And that's about apparently as feel-good as it gets for me.
I'm trying to think of other like feel-good books I've read, because I don't feel like I've read a ton of them, honestly. Like
this year I did read The House in the Cerulean Sea because I saw it all over like Book Talk, which is TikTok for book lovers. And Book Talk, and like people loved it. And so I read it and it was cute. And I was like, oh, that's a nice little feel-good book. But apparently it is the only one I have, because I was looking for something to read, and everything I saw was like Stephen King, Anne Rice, Neil Gaiman. Not that Neil Gaiman can't be a little fuzzy, but he did write Coraline. So I don't.
Yeah. It's funny because, like, as you're mentioning this, I never thought of this, but all of my book collection is the same way. Like, it's all like tons of fantasy, tons of sci-fi. Not that some of the sci-fi can't be uplifting in its own way, but I wouldn't call any of them feel-good books exactly. The only one I can really think of, which is like, the one that made me feel very good, was The Disaster Artist, because that's my favorite like nonfiction book about the making of The Room, and it's just full of. They did a movie about it, like based on it a couple of years ago, but like it was an interesting case of like adaptation, because the amount of craziness that Tommy Wiseau put Greg Sestero throughout their entire friendship is on full display in the book, and I would say maybe 22% of the crazy anecdotes made it into the movie, like. And part of the reason it's feel good is just because every situation is just so insane. Like there was one time in particular that Tommy Wiseau surprise ambushed Greg Sestero into running a 9-mile race with him. Because he said, just meet me at this place at 10 a.m. or whenever the race would go off. And so he showed up in shorts and sandals, and he had registered them both for Bay to Breakers, which is a 9-mile run in San Francisco, because he wanted to beat him to prove he was better than him to him. And then he was like, yeah, I just walked and did a 5-hour 9-mile walk and had a barbecue with people. And, Yeah.
Listen, this is a message to every person who knows me. If you invite me to a place and then hit me with 9 miles of anything, I will kill you. Literally, like, hide your body.
Well, oh man, I had a really dark reaction to that.
That is a threat. Oh, good God. I once dated this guy who, and I told this joke on stage that same weekend, that we were dating, and there was that weekend coming up, his family, they were going on like a 14-mile bike ride in the morning during this time of year, during this type of weather. And he was like, oh my gosh, do you want to come? And that's when I knew that was not the right relationship for me. Because first of all, who the fuck is going on a 14-mile bike ride in 30-degree weather? And he obviously didn't know me very well. So.
Yeah, there was one year I was, like, I used to be super hardcore into biking, and there was one year, like, my first goal year, I set out I wanted to do 1,200 miles, which was just 100 a month. And I actually did a lot of biking in January and February, like, in service of that goal, and it was fucking miserable. Like, even, like, my most hardcore bike years in ones past that year where I did more bike riding, I would refuse to start until at least late March because, like, you have not known hell until you've done 10 miles with freezing cold weather and winds, and then your sock gets soaked because you've stepped into a slush puddle. Like, just the worst thing in the world.
What's so interesting about that is so many people, like, do that for fun and then say, you haven't really lived until you've done this thing. Or, I think a lot of humans place a lot of value in suffering.
Yes.
And I have decided as a human that I don't want to suffer needlessly ever. Mm. And I think that's okay.
I think there can be something said about challenging yourself in some ways, but like I've kind of exited my race running years at this point. Like I did 2 full marathons at one point and then like a bunch of halves. And then just like something hit me during the pandemic when I was like doing the very last half marathon I'll do with a friend of mine who wanted to do one. I'm like, why am I doing this? Like, I'm not actually having fun doing this anymore. Like, it's not really a challenge because I've done it so many times. Like, and that was it. It was sort of like Forrest Gump said. It's like, and just like that, my running days was over.
Well, here's the thing. I think I've been through enough.
Yeah.
That might be a hot take, but I'm going to take 26 years of life experience and say, you know what? That was tough, and I don't want to do it anymore.
Sure.
So here on out, anything that comes up where somebody's like, hey, do you want to do this really uncomfortable thing or this thing where you will either be cold or in pain or anything like that, I'm going to be like, well, what is the point?
I feel like it's probably tied together with the same reason that people like roller coasters, haunted houses, or horror movies too. Like, even though it's an unpleasant experience, like going through like a 14-mile bike ride in freezing cold weather, there's something that probably like triggers something in you that makes you feel alive by doing that.
Oh, and that's fine.
Yeah.
I think that's great. I've done a lot in my life where I like got on the other side of it, and I was like, that was a really great experience. I wasn't so fantastic when I was doing it, but now I can say I've done it, and it was a hard thing. Mm-hmm. I don't want to do too many hard things anymore.
Yeah. I kind of feel the same way.
I just want to do the things that I enjoy and stop getting so frustrated at myself for doing things that make me happy.
Yeah, this is actually like, I feel like this is a thing that pops up every couple of years, specifically within the improv theater. And I don't know, it might pop up with stand-up too, but I haven't seen it as much. It's just like, improv is a lot of fun. And it's like this whole new world when you get into it and like get really into it. But then like, your core group of people gets way, way too into it for a period and like wants to take it incredibly seriously. And I went through this phase too, because there were like seasons at the Harrisburg Improv Theater. I was on 12 improv teams. So that was like my life. But I've recently gone through this with another like group of improvisers that, I know, love and make great comedy with. But my reaction is always kind of like, I have a job that already stresses me out enough. Like, I don't want this to be a job. Don't make this a job. And like, you do run into people too who just want to take it super seriously. And, that's not me. Like, that's cool if that's you, but and on some level I can respect somebody wanting to take it seriously. But for me, art is just like decompressing, having fun. Same with doing stand up. Like, I have never once gone to a mic or done a show that I wasn't having fun with stand up, because that's just kind of like the vibe I've taken with it. So.
Yeah, and I think that I do tend to pull away from things as soon as it feels like an obligation. And so, like, that's what makes me a little bit nervous about doing a podcast. But, like, this doesn't feel like work to me. We're just having a conversation, and there just so happens to be a microphone here.
Yeah.
And that's what I like about it. And it is kind of like a vacation for me to step away and, like, get perspective on things. So,
although tonight, when we're both tired, hangry, and have just finished work.
Right. Well, and so that's the other thing that I run into with therapy, too, is like I do therapy every single week. And some days I'm just like, this feels like something that I have to do and doesn't feel like something that I'm actually going to feel like will be productive for me because I don't want to do it.
Yeah.
And then when I have that thought, I'm like, oh, shit, you need therapy. So then I go to therapy. So it's, it's one of those things where I just run into I get in my own way in a lot of things. And in a lot of things that I enjoy and a lot of things that I know are good for me as soon as they feel like I have to do them.
Yeah, that was like, I feel like that's the same with everybody, really, is like when you make something that's fun into a job, it's not even like, I've heard this with Twitch streamers a lot, actually, who play video games for a living. And like a lot of them are saying that like, I used to enjoy playing video games, but having to do it for like 8 to 9 hours a day in front of an audience, it's just not fun. It's a job. So. Yeah.
Well, and that's kind of how I feel, too, a little bit about stand-up, because a friend of mine, we were talking about like my job, like my career and stuff like that. And I had told her I was getting back into banking, and she was like, oh, and she's in banking. We work together in banking. And she was like, oh, I guess I didn't see you getting back into banking. I was like, well, what did you see me doing? And she was like, professional comedy. And I was like, I'm really glad you have that faith in me. But I mean, if I, had to, anytime when I feel like I have to write things, I don't want to write things. So I don't know if I could cut it as a professional comedian, because then it wouldn't be fun for me anymore because I have to do it.
Yeah, I forget I saw this on a podcast just recently too with other comedians where I can't remember what it was for the love of me, but they were talking about like the concept of forcing jokes. And like that has been something that's never worked for me. Like when I was first starting stand up, like my whole mantra was for the first 6 months, I didn't want to repeat any jokes. I just wanted to try all new stuff. 2 mics a week for the first 6 months. And I came up with some pretty like really lame observations and things when in reality, the better thing to be would have just been taking like ones that worked and work more on them, which is kind of what I do now. But like, and I think that's why I don't go to open mics every single week too, is just some weeks I don't feel like I have anything to say. So like.
No, that's true. And I feel that same way sometimes. I also, my process is kind of, I'll work on one set for like a month and then I'll rotate them. And it's not always new stuff. It's some of it I go back and do old stuff. And then that's been working for me. But like I said, like, I feel like I've been doing so much of my old stuff and that I need to write new stuff. But now that I need to write new stuff, it's an obligation. And therefore, fuck me.
Yeah.
So that's not, I mean, I struggle with that. And I think, that I know that I'm not alone in that. So that's nice.
Oh, yeah, definitely. That's why great minds meld together sometimes.
That's right. Yeah.
But yeah, it's one of those things where. And it's funny, too, because, like, I've found a ton of my old joke books as I've been slowly still unpacking things in my house. And there are a lot of jokes in these that I think are, like, total winners from, like, 4 or 5 years ago that just, for whatever reason, I totally forgot about and stopped doing them.
Yeah, so. I've had that happen a couple of times. I was looking through, like, old stuff, and I was like, oh, shit, I totally forgot about that joke. That was a good one.
I also like to, like, I feel like every comedian has like 1 or 2 jokes too that they try to make work so much and then they just never do. And like one in particular I have that I've tried like 5 or 6 different angles on, and I always get the same response from an audience about is like, I thought it was a funny concept that like if I walk into a bathroom that smells too good, like those orange creamsicle like urinal cakes, I don't trust the bathroom because I know it's covering up something insidious. I've tried this as a joke like 50 times, and everybody's response is like, how nobody likes a stinky bathroom. And I think that like
I think they're just afraid to admit that that's true. I think they're afraid to admit that that is the fear. You know, I think that's an innate thing that we all feel, and you've just called it out. And they weren't ready for it. I think that was just the one truth too many, Hal, that you introduced to them.
The best angle I came with it was I compared it to like that girlfriend or boyfriend that you date that's just way too overwhelmingly nice to you, that you know some darkness is just brooding underneath. Like clearly this person is hiding some damage because they're so nice all the time, which is me, strangely enough. So
those people are called my parents and are responsible for many things. No, that's fine.
But anyway, I guess something, unless you wanted to say something else about that, but it looked like you had something else to say.
Well, kind of, because so we had talked about getting into the recovering gifted kids.
Yeah, that's what I was going to segue to, actually.
Damn, this is why we do a podcast, damn it. This is so good.
Great minds are on similar wavelengths or something.
Great minds
like that.
do a podcast together.
Yeah. But yeah, I thought that this was a few people had actually told me that they thought that was a very interesting concept for an episode when we ended with the thing we were going to talk about, but then didn't talk about last time. But yeah, I feel like just like for starters, I feel like from the talks you and I have had, I feel like we have similar backgrounds in that a lot of that, like the Iowa tests of basic skills that I took in school, like always put me in like the gifted programs and areas, which got me placed in like the like above level everything in school. But then I struggled with that for a myriad of reasons. Like I was being bullied hardcore at school for the most part and couldn't concentrate on any studies. B, I was just a huge procrastinator, which I think the anxiety probably had something to do with. And C, too, that as we're finding out with the education system, just like some of the best, most intuitive minds don't do well in those sort of structured places. But for a myriad of reasons, like the fact that I was diagnosed as gifted made my life a lot harder in school time. And especially from like my parents' end. Like I was talking to my friend Steve about this a few weeks ago because the way it kind of worked out with school was I never felt safe at all. Like at school, I was bullied. The teachers yelled at me because I didn't do my assignments on time or was doing poorly that didn't live up to like my testing expectations. And then my parents were yelling at me at home because my grades were bad and I wasn't turning in assignments and teachers were contacting them. So it felt like getting hit from all angles. And like part of this was, I think, this over evaluation in my ability. Not that I think I'm a stupid person. I think I'm smart in a lot of ways, but I don't think schooling and academics have ever been my forte. And so that was something that like definitely put a damper on things.
Yeah, I don't think that would be super helpful growing up. I mean, if that's not the kind of environment that you can learn in, that's not going to help you grow, and it's just going to cause a lot of emotional damage for later on. So I can totally relate to you on that.
Yeah, I think that really the only time I started getting good grades actually was when one of the things my parents did in high school that I think was a stroke of genius was they started just noticing what I was interested in and started to like develop more of like I was interested in doing movie stuff because they got a video editor and that was what I was spending most of my time with. That and like I used an old RPG maker to program some video games at some point too. So they started like focusing more on creative fields, I want to say around my junior year of high school. And then my grades started to improve rapidly because like everything was in service of something that I was more interested in. And they actually, like, as homeschooling is becoming more of a thing in today's world, too, I was reading that, like, that's the huge recommendation for homeschoolers and alternative schooling is to find something your child is really interested in and then just dedicate a lot of, if not most of your time to that.
No, I think that's a really good point. So in my situation, a lot of people don't know this about me, but I had really shitty grades up until about 6th grade.
Okay.
It was there was a line. And so what happened was that my mom, and I don't know quite where this came into, like where this was then the narrative, but my mom had this idea that Ian, my brother, was only good at like math and science. Okay. And that I was only good at like English and history and like artsy stuff. So she kind of put us into these boxes. So I wanted to be an astronaut until about the age of 10. And I wanted to be an astronaut. I was like, I'm going to go to space. I'm going to go see everything. And I'm going to discover a bunch of stuff. And it's going to be so great. And my mom completely put the kibosh on that by saying, you're not good at math and science. You're not going to be an astronaut.
Oh, man.
And I think about that to this day. Anyway.
I have a similar experience to share, actually, and this was like such a foundational experience. This was a whole one of my favorite conversations in my first movie I did, Nowhere, PA, was about two friends talking about this. So like I was really into soccer when I was a kid, actually. Like I loved playing soccer more than anything else. And then like my dad really wanted me to play football, which was another like whole big can of worms. I think we've talked about a little bit, but like everything was kind of in service of him making sure that football was going to be the priority for me, somewhat vicariously, somewhat because he loved football. And so like I wanted to do some more of like the traveling teams with soccer and like do more of the soccer sort of things. And my dad specifically told me, is like, you shouldn't waste time with something you're never going to be good at, which was like kind of like what your mom was telling you about being an astronaut, especially when you're 10 years old. Like, let your kid be a fucking astronaut, seriously.
Well, and the other thing about it too is that it was hard for my dad because he was trying to foster a love of science for us from like afar because he was living in California at the time.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So there were a lot of birthdays and Christmases where he sent us a telescope. I loved that fucking telescope, and I had these stargazer books, and I would be out in the yard looking up at the sky, and it would have been a beautiful backstory for my eventual astronautdom, where then I wrote a bunch of books, and I can be like, oh, ever since I was a little girl, I looked up at the sky, I wanted to be in space. But yeah, fuck me, I guess. He sent me a microscope. He sent us just all of the science stuff. And I feel like if I had been given just a little bit from my mom of like, and I needed the discipline because I was not grasping math and science. I was having a really difficult time with it. So if somebody had been like, hey, let's help you try to understand it, then I could have maybe explored that avenue. I didn't start to really succeed with math or science until I got to college.
Yeah.
I really struggled with math and science all throughout middle school, high school, just struggled because I didn't get that extra oomph from a young age because my mom saw that I got D's in math and science and just said, I guess you're just not good at it, and didn't like help me. So then when I got to college, something like clicked for me and I started understanding it. And now as an adult, and now I work in banking, and when I said that to a couple of people I went to high school with and some teachers, they were like, are you sure about that? I don't think we should put you with numbers.
So was it like, was it some certain aspect of math that just clicked with you finally that got you into it in college? Like you were super into banking and accounting and then that math just made sense to you?
So I think it was coming down to the idea of solving problems because that's not part of my issues with math was I couldn't really understand, first of all, a real life application to it. I didn't understand why it was important. And then on the other side of that too was I just couldn't understand where it's hard to explain. If you gave me a formula and said, okay, here's the formula. Here is something that you need that formula to solve. I could do it. But if you just gave me the problem and didn't tell me what formula to use, nothing.
So like the application of it was what was the issue with you.
Right.
Which is probably the most important thing for real life application of math.
Exactly. So I'd be like, yes, you have a problem, but you haven't given me the formula I need to solve that problem. And then as I got older, I was like, well, what's even more stupid than that is you not giving me the formula, whereas if this were a real life situation, I could just ask somebody what the formula is or Google it, and then I'd have the formula and then I could solve the problem.
Yeah.
So, but once I got to college, I think maybe my brain just developed into the right way, or maybe just like I started to actually give a shit about grades once I was paying for my way through school. I don't know.
See, I had a similar sort of situation too, because I also sucked really, really bad at math and science. In fact, I had to go to summer school my sophomore year because I flunked geometry, which I ended up. The weird thing is I ended up knowing everything well. I just like didn't put any effort into the tests. So I ended up actually like teaching geometry to the other 5 people who failed it in like summer school. But For me, what happened was like when I got into poker, actually, is when I started getting more into math because I was reading like advanced poker strategy, and it's all about like game theory and calculating risk and percentages and like all that. And for whatever reason, that just made sense to me. And like gambling and game math is interesting to me. Like, I mean, I've worked in gambling a lot of my life, like either at the horse track or like, at the lottery. And all the lottery statistics really fascinate me, like for like pool percentages, number of people playing, those sort of things, certain combinations of numbers. That's math I'm into because that's very tangible to me. But all other math is just like, ugh, could not care less.
Something I really got an interest in as I got into like the workforce was trends. I loved finding patterns, and I think that also goes into like problem solving for me. So like with my last job with the staffing, I was compiling data about what the tenure of people who were being fired or left was. So it turned out that over 50% of the people that had been terminated during my time there were employed for less than 90 days.
Oh, okay.
So, I mean, and so taking that data and then going back and say, okay, what's contributing to this data? Like, I love that. And I do it all the time. And what I do as a manager, especially, is like compiling data when it comes to customers, when it comes to what my employees are doing. And I mean, I always tell my employees is like, I can tell whether or not you're doing XYZ behaviors because of these numbers.
See, that would make you, I know that you didn't like HR for a number of reasons, but like that's what made you an awesome HR manager was that you took the time to care about those sort of things. And, it's kind of like, what we were saying before, like just making, like we were saying about like homeschool kids, like give it a focus kind of thing. Like for you and me, obviously we have focuses in which math exists and works well. It's sort of like, in The Office, when they're talking about apple pies, suddenly Kevin can do any sort of complicated math if it's just food math, but any other math he can't do whatsoever. So that's how I always equate.
Sounds about right. Yeah.
Something you were saying too about like, I don't know the application of the formula in real life led me to like another problem I wanted to talk about with the whole like education system for the gifted kids too, is I didn't know how to do shit for real life things graduating high school and definitely not graduating college or graduating college too. Like I did not know how to file taxes. I did not know how to balance a budget. I actually didn't even know how the taxation system or like the concept of interest or like was it neoliberal economics worked at all out of college, really into my 30s. And I feel like this is a great injustice done to a lot of kids, is like so many real life skills are not taught in schools because they are more focused on like AP chemistry and AP like calculus and things like that.
We are definitely not the only people who feel that way.
Oh, yeah.
It's all over the internet, and just like how we were not given real life skills. And I think part of the problem with that, well, first of all, like you said, like all of the schools are based off of like standardized testing. That right now, like high schools are really just training you to get to college, and you're not going to learn that shit in college. So, and so like a lot of people are pushing for like life skills classes to be reintroduced into schools with like a more, not like, okay, the girls are going to go learn how to sew and take care of babies and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I think financial wellness is a huge area of opportunity for young people. And that's kind of one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about banking and why I went back to it, is because you would not believe the amount of 30, 40, 50-year-olds who do not understand anything about how money works.
Oh, this was me until very recently. And also I feel like I have a long way to go to learn more about fiscal well-being. It was so bad too. I don't know if I ever told you this, but my first year with the Department of Revenue, actually, I was suspended for a couple of days because I didn't file a state tax return. And the reason for this was that, like, as I was doing my federal tax return, the state one, they owed me 5 cents for the calculation. So I was like, well, it's not even worth it to file for them giving me a nickel back because they're not going to do it anyway. So I thought I didn't have to file taxes if I wasn't owed any money, which is not true. And I found that out the hard way.
I saw this thing on the internet about how it's like you go to do your taxes and the government's like, yep, you have to guess how much you owe us. And then you're like, oh, but what if I get it wrong? And they're like, well, you go to jail. And the government's like, but we know how much you owe and we could just invoice you, but we're not going to do that either.
Oh my God, this was something. So did you ever watch Adam Ruins Everything when that was
Yes.
on TV?
I love Adam Ruins Everything.
Oh, me too. One of the more interesting episodes, because there's a lot of interesting stuff they talk about there, was the idea of automatic tax returns, and how it was something that was proposed both under Reagan and Obama, but like companies like HR Block and like the accounting firms successfully lobbied to kill it in Congress because they make so much money off of tax season.
Well, but also keep in mind, I mean, that's so bad for consumers because so many people rely on things like H&R Block and TurboTax. And it's not so bad, like, if you actually go in person and talk to use a tax professional that they employ or anything like that. But the software that they have now where you can just do it yourself, let me tell you, I got an accountant, I want to say I've been using an accountant since I was like 21, 22. Best decision I ever made because I did my own taxes for the first however many years I was doing my taxes. And like after talking to Jason, he was like, yeah, you've definitely shorted yourself on returns for years. And so that's a huge problem for consumers on top of the fact that like it's not so much, you know, if I short myself, the government's not going to track me down and be like, hey, actually, we owe you money. The government's never going to do that.
No.
And on the flip side, if I owe them money and I don't realize it, you know, fuck me, I guess.
Yeah.
You know?
It's maybe I should start employing an accountant then, because I always do my own taxes. And I don't really understand a ton of it either. I really just kind of put my income into the calculator, you know, dependence.
Now, it might not change your whole life, but it did for me because I was a student and I wasn't taking advantage of like a whole bunch of like tax breaks and stuff like that.
Well, I know my taxes are going to be more complicated this year because this is the first year I've owned a house. So they're more complicated, but I get more money back. So that'll be very helpful. Like, It kind of looks like the accrued like homeowner credit that I get will almost be a whole mortgage payment for me. So that's pretty awesome.
Get an accountant, man. It was best to say you pay. I think last year I paid him $100 and something. And honestly, best money I've ever spent.
Listen up, accountants. If anybody is looking for Hal Kramer's business, this is an unusual bid I'm putting out to the public. Email me your name, your profession, your rate, and how I know you, because that'll be important. And then you too can be Hal Kramer's accountant, a job that comes with incredible prestige. And yeah, I can't even lie about this anymore. This is boring. But
I don't know. I'm like thinking about my accountant right now, who's actually like a family friend. And I'm like thinking like, you know, I do care a little bit more about Jason than I do about some other people that I know because he does my taxes and he does them well.
Yeah.
So shout out Jason. We love you, man.
Yeah, Jason. Don't know you, but you got a glaring recommendation from Shannon.
Yeah. I would recommend him, but he has too many clients, so.
Yeah, I think that like kind of where the conversation's veering on the matter of like recovering gifted kids. I guess we can do a ton of episodes about this too. But
oh my gosh.
Kind of the way I'm thinking about this are like failures in the education system in general. And like this is something that definitely has been in the news significantly more recently since like critical race theory has been a sort of buzzword a lot of people have thrown out about like things that were missed in education classes growing up. But part of my depression, I think, overall, is the fact that I was misled on so many things, specifically about American history.
Yep.
That, you know, I'm learning about. Like, I think a good example would be the Watchmen TV series. Did you ever watch that?
Mm-mm.
So it opens up with the Tulsa race riots of, I think it was 1920 or 1921, where, are you familiar with that?
No, this is the first time hearing about it.
Oh, good.
Now
this illustrates
I'm angry.
the point. Okay, so what it was, and I want to clarify too, I thought that this was, because Watchmen is supposed to be an alternate universe kind of thing, and the Watchmen TV show focused more on the intersection of race in like everyday life and how it's affected the American dream. And so I thought that they made this up as an illustration because it was so outlandish. Like what it was, you know, typical story in 1920 Tulsa, woman is alone in an elevator with a black elevator operator. She screams. They assume that he like assaulted or molested her. Tensions run high. And another background thing about Tulsa, too, was Tulsa had become what they referred to as the Black Wall Street at that point because, like, there were a lot of incredibly successful black businesses in the area. And so a lot of very resentful white folks out there. And they basically used the pretense of this elevator guy to burn down the entirety of Tulsa, wiping out, like, millions of dollars in 1920s dollars with of black wealth. They had airplanes flying around shooting people, which, again, and, like, people in the Klan came to burn down Tulsa to the ground. And I watched this with Watchmen, never having heard of this thing at all. And I'm like, wow, they made up a really outlandish thing. But looking it up on Wikipedia, it was like they didn't exaggerate anything. It was completely true. And there are just like tons of incidents like this throughout American history I never heard about. And like, I think that's a failing of the educational system in general.
I absolutely agree with you on that. And I talk about this all the time. But, I mean, and I'm not the only one who feels this way, that, like, we were taught that, like, yep, people were racist, and then Martin Luther King fixed racism, and now nobody's racist anymore.
Oh, my God. This has been, like, the biggest revelation for me. Is exactly what I was taught in my household growing up. It's like, oh yeah, racism has been gone since the 60s when they passed civil rights legislation, and now everybody's on a level playing field. And it's the most depressing thing in the world to see like that is completely not true. In some ways, things are even worse than they were in the 60s. And interestingly enough, just because by virtue of where I was raised, like I was raised in a sort of middle class neighborhood in the middle of like inner city Harrisburg. And most of the kids growing up were like Black and Latino kids who were my friends. And God love them. Like they heard me say things like this all the time and still loved me and were still friends with me. And that's like another depression of mine is like I feel so shitty that like I had these like very reductionist conversations with some of my best friends because my family told me that racism has been dead since the 60s. Mm-hmm. Yeah, sorry. I think I hijacked your thought there a little bit.
No, that's totally fine. I mean, but that's the whole thing is just that there's it I don't know. It just makes me all bleh.
Yeah.
I don't know. I like think back at like the way I learned things when I was a kid, and I definitely don't think that they were conducive to a healthy person for later on.
No, not at all. Like one of the things I remember, like just one last thing on like specifically slavery instruction, like during history classes, was the history books we had in like 5th and 6th grade told us about like religion among the slaves, and they did like whole sections talking about how most Africans who came over enslaved had their own religions, but then decided of their own free will to convert to the religion of their owners. And when you're a 10 or 11-year-old kid, you buy that. Like, yeah, my teacher's telling me that must be true. But in reality, no, that was probably not the case.
Yeah. So actually, to kind of move on to the next thing, because before we even started the podcast, we were getting into something, and I was like, no, this is great for the podcast. And it's been like 45 minutes.
I'm so glad you remember.
We never got it to. So here we are. So what I've discovered in my life is that a lot of people have kind of dulled my shine.
Aww.
And I was thinking a lot about how I wanted to say that, so that's how I got there.
Well, you made me say aw, so it was a good way of saying it.
So just like growing up and like going through all sorts of things. So the first time it happened, I was in 5th grade, and it was in my like literature class, and we had to do a book report. And my 5th grade teacher, I read The Scarlet Pimpernel because I was an overachiever.
Side note, that's one of my favorite Broadway musicals, but yes.
So I read the book. I did my book report. I worked really, really hard on it. And she graded it, and she took away points because it was, quote, above my reading level.
What?
Yeah.
How dare you rise above your station?
Right. She took away points for that. And I was like, are you kidding me? So that was the first time it happened. And then later on, like when I got into like music and things like that, so when I started playing the trumpet, they would or when I started singing, they would purposely put me in like trumpet 2 or trumpet 3 because, quote, we need a stronger voice in those sections. And then when it came to singing, they were like, oh, we're going to put you in this voice part that you don't want to be in because we need a strong singer in that voice part. And then another very specific situation that happened that I think about all the time, and I don't think she realizes what she did, but I realize what she did. So I did theater in high school, and I really loved theater, and I never got a lead role ever the entire time, and I very much wanted one, but I never got one. And so we come to my senior year, and one of the electives was a drama class that was taught by the drama club, what's it called, the advisor.
Yeah, sure.
And so I take that class, and I'm like, oh, great, maybe I'll learn something. And we get to the section on monologues, and I was like, ooh, a monologue. I don't really know a lot of good monologues. So I went to her, and I was like, hey, and like I said, this is the director of every play and musical I've been in for almost 4 years at that point.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, hey, I was wondering if you knew a monologue that you think would be really good for me. And she was like, oh my gosh, I have the perfect monologue for you. And she pulled out this monologue from a chorus line. And the particular monologue, I've never seen the show.
I've actually never seen a chorus line either, which I'm sure somebody will be like, how have you never seen that? Or...
I know, they're going to say it to me too.
Yeah.
But the particular monologue that she chose was one where it was a dancer, and she was a very talented dancer, like the best dancer, but she was ugly, and she never got the lead roles because she was ugly, even though she was talented. And I was like, hold on a goddamn minute.
I absolutely hate it when because I've seen this a couple of times. Do you think she deliberately did?
I don't know. I think about it all the time.
I took an acting class when I first moved back here from Los Angeles over in Lancaster. And it was a scene study. So we were all given a scene to do with 1 to 2 people that we worked on pretty much the entire session, for 2 to 3 months. And there was one guy in our class who very clearly was not out of the closet, but very clearly gay. I had been raised in a Mennonite family, and the teacher gave him a play or a scene specifically about that, about a gay guy who gets beaten up in the street and is rescued by the Tooth Fairy. It was a bizarre play, but I remember thinking about that. I was like, I don't think this guy is out yet, and I think he's still processing things, so I don't know if this is actually helping him, even though I think you're helping him. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I really don't like it when teachers do, it's one thing to give you, for drama, a monologue that fits your voice and fits your personality, and it's another thing to,
mimic life?
Yeah. Especially in an insulting way, with the chorus line audition or chorus line monologue you were given.
Yeah. And I think about it a lot. And I think back and I never did get a lead role in anything. And, I think back and I'm like, well, those other people were prettier than me and maybe more talented than me. And
sometimes it's really just about who greases the axle the best. That's exactly how our drama club worked too. There were a certain in crowd of people who would always get the lead roles, and at least one of them couldn't sing at all. And the musical that they put her in, which was after I graduated, I saw, was not a disaster, but definitely somebody a little bit over their head with that. However, the reason I was mentioning this is my middle sister has always been a fantastic singer, a fantastic actress, and was really into all these things, but was never really in the in crowd of the drama people. But she took every role that they gave her. She did it. She did chorus incredibly well. She did small roles incredibly well. She was very kind to everybody, never complained about things. And then senior year, they gave her the lead in the musical, which actually was Marguerite in The Scarlet Pimpernel. And that's part of the reason that's one of my favorite musicals, is their production of it was fantastic. And there were inner circle people who were so angry that somebody outside the inner circle of kind of the suck-ups with the drama club, that a lot of them quit the musical rather than do it. Yeah. All because, and then my sister fucking killed it too. It's still one of my favorite moments, seeing The Scarlet Pimpernel and seeing her in that with the cast that did it so much justice, and such a good show. And so it very well may be that you just weren't in with the right people as well, because there's so many politics to just every level of life that has nothing to do with how talented you are sometimes. Yeah, no. I mean, but I've found that that's been kind of a theme for my life, where a lot of things that I try to be a part of, I do kind of get brushed under the rug a little bit. And I don't know if that's me, or if I let it happen, or I don't know. Yeah, I feel like that happens with me a lot too. Like, just being more of a passive personality in general and sort of like, yeah, whatever, guys, we'll go with the flow. It leads to like more people. I can't think of a good way to describe it. It's kind of like the squeaky wheel gets the grease kind of thing. Like,
Right. Well, I find that I'm terribly accommodating. Is like when people ask like, who wants to do this, and I'll be like, I'll take the thing that nobody else wants. And that's how, I mean, a lot of the roles that I had in high school were roles that like literally nobody wanted. Most specifically, one of my most vivid memories was when we did A Christmas Carol. I was the boy at the end where Ebenezer Scrooge leans out the window and he goes, "Boy, what day is today?" And I'm like, "It's Christmas Day." And he's like, "Go get a goose." And I was like, "The one as big as me?" I was like 5'4". And he was like, "Yeah, that goose." I was like, "Holy shit, all right, I'm out." And that was my shining moment in theater, was
playing
the boy. I played a lot of men in high school. I also did a lot of like duets with girls who wanted to do duets, but none of the guys were either talented enough or wanted to do a duet. So I would sing the guy part because nobody wanted to duet with me singing the girl part. So I had to be everybody's dude.
Yeah. It's for better or for worse, it's shaped who you are in life, though, which is, you are an arty person. You make movies, you do stand up, you get to do all these things, and you have a thriving career. So like, that's kind of where I land on with this a lot of the time is like, I've had a lot of negative experiences, but like they essentially like made me into what I presume is a good person and will be a better person. In fact, that was something I wanted to talk about too with like the going back to the recovering gifted kids idea, which I'm sure we will discuss in detail much more in the future too. And it relates to like what I was reading about the Dunning-Kruger effect a couple of weeks ago, was that like I had a very exaggerated idea of how famous and successful I was going to be as a filmmaker. But they were saying one of the positives of Dunning-Kruger is that the people who are delusional about their own abilities generally take the most swings in a lot of ways because they think it's going to work out. And that was totally true with me. Like I took a swing and moved to LA. I did like 2 feature films that bankrupted me both times I did it. I just did so much stuff because I thought that, I was going to make it. The quality of said stuff was a little all over the place, but like my delusional thoughts about how I was going to succeed got me to do more things, if I'm looking for a silver lining there.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
Although, like, I feel like I'm pretty fatalistic about where I stand with these things now, and I still do them, so maybe I didn't need delusion to, like, do a movie or something like that.
Yeah, that's true.
Like, I've never done stand-up with the understanding or the thought that I'm going to be a famous stand-up. It's more just like, I like all of these people, and I like telling jokes. So let's all tell jokes and be friends together.
Yeah. One of the reasons I like to do stand-up is that I enjoy challenging myself intellectually, and I feel that stand-up does that a lot for me in the sense of being able to tell a story and to do it amusingly. So I think I do enjoy it in that aspect as like, I think it really challenges me to tap into what I like about myself.
I think that one of the things I like about stand-up too is there are a ton of different paths that you can take to try to do stand-up. Like, I feel like in 5 years of doing it, I've seen it all, even on the local level. Like, I've seen people attempt to do characters on stage or personas. I've seen people do nothing but crowd work. I've seen people go up with no idea about what they're going to say. I've seen musicians do stand-up. That's something I've wanted to try forever too, because I feel like I'm good at writing musical comedy, but I've just never been able to sit down and actually discipline myself enough to write comedy songs. But it feels like there's a lot of different ways to be a successful comedian, which is in contrast a lot of the times to like how things devolve with improv, in my opinion. Because like when you get to improv, there's a certain point at which you get people telling you what to do and breaking down everything you did on stage as poorly. Like, oh, you made the wrong game move in this part. I remember very specifically the first time I told somebody there that this is not a job to me, don't make it a job, was after one of our groups. A really good friend of mine who was in the group, the show was kind of all over the place, but that's kind of what improv is. And one of the snobbier improvers in our group was like calling him out afterwards, saying, "You made very poor game decisions here and you need to do better about this." And my friend like went home and cried about it, he told me, because he like felt so bad about it. And I'm like, no, this isn't the way things are supposed to be, man. Like, be happy with things.
Yeah, like it's not, don't take it too seriously. And that's another thing with like comedy sometimes, like as a host too. Like I struggle a lot because like when I host, the comics can get kind of fraudulent, be a little bit snippy, and whatever, and they might say some mean things that made me think a little bit later that maybe I don't like myself a whole bunch. And then I remember that they are comedians, and a lot of them are not very good comedians.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So, I mean, like, when it comes to that kind of thing, like, if you're just going to be an asshole, like,
Yeah, I was describing this actually to somebody who wanted to do, like, in the run of things recently, they're like, oh, was thinking about trying stand-up, but I'm worried that I'm going to be so bad they're going to ban me. And I'm like, I've never seen somebody banned from a stand-up stage. Like, you might get people not reacting to your jokes if you tell, like, really bad, reductive, like, awful jokes. But, like, nobody gets banned. If anything, they just remove themselves because people don't get their jokes. I put that in quotation marks. But... Yeah. If I'm telling unfunny jokes on stage, have never thought that people just didn't get me. I'm just like, yeah, it wasn't a funny joke.
Yeah.
Except about stinky bathrooms.
No, I think
nobody understands me.
And that's the thing. How I'm not gonna judge them for not laughing at that joke, but they all know it's true.
Too close to the truth.
Yeah.
So anyway, we've only got a couple of minutes left because I missed all of the cues because we were having such a good conversation. But yeah, I just wanted to point out too that like what Shannon was saying about hosting, Shannon hosts an open mic occasionally at HMAC on Mondays. You want to tell us a little bit about that before we go?
Yeah, it's an open mic on Mondays that I host sometimes. And it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I have never made it down to see Shannon host, unfortunately, because like every time I've been wanting to go, I've had to work until like 9:30, and I'll be like, Shannon, are you still going? And she's like, no, we were done at 9, bro.
Yeah. So I'll be a little more specific. So at the HMAC in Harrisburg, Harrisburg Midtown Arts Center is what that stands for.
Yeah.
It's the Mr. Tongue open mic run by the legendary Ron Kane. Shout out Ron.
Legendary. Yeah. Hi,
Ron. I have a lot of respect for Ron. He runs a lot of shit and doing shows all the time.
He's a very hardworking guy, and I really like.
I appreciate how much he works. I feel like some people don't. I feel like I'm about to throw shade. I'm not meaning to throw shade, but I feel like Ron Kane should be more appreciated in the Harrisburg comedy community. And it might be a hot take, but I said it.
I agree with that because I think his contributions to Harrisburg comedy go a lot deeper than his own comedy, which is something, like you said, people fail to see a lot of the time. Like just the sheer idea of putting together as many open, like over the pandemic, he was responsible for keeping comedy alive, essentially, like putting all those backyard mics together and everything. And
yeah. I mean, he's got open mics, he's got shows, he's doing a podcast. So I mean, he's always running, and I appreciate him. Yeah. I don't think there are very many comics in the scene that are as welcoming and are as encouraging as Ron is.
Aw, I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
That's exactly what you want to hear. Like.
Yeah.
With things.
So, I mean, and he gave me the opportunity to host at HMAC every once in a while. I think I'd go like every 3 weeks or something like that. But I appreciate it. It's a good spot. The comics who come out are pretty good. We'd like some more comics to come out. People try your hand at it. We could use some more female comics in the space. That's not just at HMAC, but always. In general. But that's always going to be my soapbox. Be like more women in comedy because women are funny, even though there are some people who don't think so. Yeah,
that's thankfully that's a viewpoint that's on the downslope. But it was something I heard thrown around a lot when I was in Los Angeles, like from 2011 to 2014. There was at least one producer who's definitely not going to be listening to this podcast that told me at one point. He was like an older, like 55-year-old guy too. He's like, let me tell you something. I forgot what this was in response to. It was like, women just ain't naturally funny. And which is, when you're a young person working in the industry, hearing what somebody who's super successful in doing it, like that's a pretty formative moment. Not that I believed him or anything like that, but I thought that was a very, like, the more I've thought about that moment as I've gotten older and more mature, I'm like, that was pretty fucked up.
All right, you know what? Here's my next hot take. No one is naturally funny. we are all depressed and traumatized.
Yes.
So, I mean, I don't think that's a gender thing. I think that's a the world sucks and raise your children better kind of thing.
It's a combination, I think, of like, I feel like almost all comedy is a trauma response in some way or shape
Yep.
or form, because you're trying to diffuse a situation, or your brain just gets into weird headspaces because it can't process a lot of the real, like the way things go. But then I think the other part of it is your point of view, like hearing an interesting point of view that somebody else, this is why I think Mitch Hedberg was so good too. Like the things that he would think about like a human pyramid are things that nobody else on the earth were thinking about, or ducks eat for free at Subway. Like I had never thought of that before. So like just a point of view with comedy.
And a quote from Hal that will probably end up on merch if we ever get around to merch. What did you say? It was well-adjusted people don't do comedy.
Oh yeah, I can't even take credit for that, but I'm always going to stand by that. So,
Yeah.
But anyway, this has been fun. It's been a slightly longer episode above our incredibly arbitrary 1 hour limit. But yeah, we've been doing fun things. Check out Shannon at the open mic sometimes. Try stand-up if you want to. Ladies out there who are listening, first-timers are generally pretty, like, well, like...
We're much nicer to you.
Yeah, they're very supportive of first-timers, which is part of the reason I kept with it. And
just get funny within, like, 3 months, and then that'll be fine.
Yeah, and if you're looking to support me, check out my YouTube channel with 80s Girl with Ashley Madavi, which just went live today. And there'll be a new episode at least every week for the next 4 weeks, because we shot 4 episodes 2.5 years ago. But thank you all so much for listening, and we have a great Thanksgiving, and we'll be back next week.
Gobble, gobble.
Gobble, gobble, gobble.